Thanks very much, Brian. Good morning, everybody. And thanks, Minister, for your kind words. So we've got a very packed agenda today, and this morning we have a very interesting session in relation to drugs research and policy to 2030. We're delighted to be able to have three international speakers of great renown, and I'm going to introduce each of them. I'm going to ask them then to sit on the podium. You don't get to sit here until you've done your speech, and then we'll have time for a little bit of discussion at the end. But as Brian said, we're looking at changing the running order slightly. Our first and keynote speaker, as the Minister has said, is Denis Huber from the Council of Europe. Denis has started his diplomatic career in 1990 in the French Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and since then has been working with the Council of Europe, posted both in Belgrade and in Lisbon. Since 2018, he is the Executive Secretary of the Pompidou Group. Pompidou Group was set up in 1971 by Georges Pompidou, and it organises relations between the Council of Europe presidency and member states, and then other international organisations. So as Executive Secretary, Denis has been leading on this initiative. As if that's not enough, from January of this year, he's also responsible for supervising the Council of Europe cooperation activities in the field of police and detention. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, who is going to speak to us on the Pompidou Group at 50, Human Rights at the Heart of Drugs and Addiction Policies. Put your hands together for Mr. Denis Huber. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your nice words of introduction. Thank you very much, Minister, for also your nice words and for inviting me to speak on this distinguished audience on this very interesting day. As the Minister mentioned, this is we are running towards the end of the Irish chairmanship of the Council of Europe, which started in May this year and which will end in a few days on 9 November. And there is another important it has been a quite successful chairmanship, but I will speak about this later. And there is another important feature. Yesterday, the first woman who ever has been the president of the European Court of Human Rights has started her work, her prestigious functions, and this woman is the Irish judge, Siofra O'Leary. I hope I'm not destroying her name, but she has been elected in October and she took over her office yesterday. So another important feature for the Irish chairmanship of the Council of Europe. I will drive you in my presentation in a journey through the past, because I believe it's important to better understand the present, to know something about history. Abraham Lincoln used to say, if you want to know what to do, you must first know where you come from, and then where you want to go. And this journey through the past will cover 51 years. Your previous introduction said 50 years of the Council of Europe. Yes, indeed, we celebrated the 50th anniversary last year, but as all of us, the Pompidou Group, 1 year after makes another year, 51. But don't worry, I will bring you back to the present. I have my DeLorean waiting in the garage, and we will go a little bit in the past, but go back to the present. Don't worry. So, looking back at 51 years of the Pompidou Group, I hope I will manage. Yes, great, it works. So, as the Minister mentioned, the Pompidou Group has been created in 1971 by Georges Pompidou, who was then the French president. And it's interesting to notice that at that period, there was no real awareness that drugs was a problem in Europe. It was a big problem in the US, and there was the famous French connection, which brought heroin from the former French colonies to the US through the city of Marseille. You probably have seen the Hollywood movie, which is called French Connection. But the people in Europe thought, okay, this goes to the US, so we don't really have to worry about. But Georges Pompidou was aware of the fact that this is and will become more and more a problem, and that this has to be tackled not only at national level, but at European level. And that's the reason why he decided to launch an initiative in August 1971, and he invited the 5 other countries of the then European community: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. And he also invited the United Kingdom. Why? The United Kingdom was not at the time yet a member of the European community, but at the time, Georges Pompidou already had decided that he would not veto anymore the accession of the United Kingdom to the European community. You remember probably that in the 60s, the General de Gaulle has vetoed twice the accession of the UK in the European community, and Georges Pompidou had decided not to veto this anymore. And so the so-called Cooperation Group to Combat Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking in Drugs was created as, at the beginning, an informal group which was living its ad hoc life. And it is named since then, according to its founder, Georges Pompidou. It's better known as the Pompidou Group. Another thing which is important to go back to 1971 is one thing helped a lot to create awareness in the public about the dangers of drugs, is the fact that 3 very important and famous rock stars, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, died in a space of 3 months. And this created also a shock in the public opinion, especially in France, because, as you probably know, Jim Morrison died in Paris in July 1971. Then, after 9 years of living its own life, the Pompidou Group decided to integrate within the Council of Europe, because at the time the members, Ireland had joined in the mid-70s, so Ireland was also a member, were aware of the fact that continuing to have a group which would live its own life without a permanent secretariat, without a legal and political framework, would not be a good thing and would not allow the group to survive. At some stage, there was a thinking about putting the group within the framework of the then European community. But at the time, drugs was not an issue which was under the remit of the European community, so the choice was made to put the group within the framework of the Council of Europe. And at the moment when the Pompidou Group joined if I may say so, joined the Council of Europe, there were 11 member states: Belgium, Denmark, France, the Federal Republic of Germany, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Sweden, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, which agreed to create formally the group under the Council of Europe rules, and with the specific objective of carrying out a multidisciplinary study of the problems of drug addiction and illicit drug trafficking, and maintain within the framework of this so-called partial agreement the working methods used until now by the group. So it continued to live according to its own rules, but within the general framework of the Council of Europe. And also the fact that it became an official part of the Council of Europe was also a message addressed to the other member states of the Council of Europe to join the group, but not only the member states of the Council of Europe, but also other member states which are not members of the Council of Europe, because the Pompidou Group is what we call an enlarged partial agreement. Enlarged because it can be open to non-member states of the Council of Europe, partial because it's not obligatory that all member states of the Council of Europe participate in it, and an agreement. Then during the 80s, there was an important expansion of the Pompidou Group. We had several countries joining: Greece, Norway, Portugal, Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Malta, Cyprus. And on the eve of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was to radically change the geopolitical landscape of Europe, it's more or less the time when I joined the diplomatic career, but I'm not aware that there is any connection between those two things. The Pompidou Group brought together almost all the countries of Western Europe. And at the time, in the Council of Europe, we thought that that was it. We would remain like that for decades. Nobody was anticipating that there would be the huge enlargement which took place in the 90s after the break of the Berlin Wall. In 1987, before going to the 90s, I would like to stress the importance of the multi-city study of drug misuse, which was an initiative of the Pompidou Group, because there was an awareness that governments were lacking of scientific data about drug use in their countries, and that's the reason why the Pompidou Group has launched an initiative to collect those data in a number of cities: Amsterdam, Dublin, Hamburg, London, Paris, Rome, and Stockholm, because you can only build up good policies if you have solid data. And this has been a pioneer initiative, and it led to the awareness that indeed governments need to have data, strong and solid data available in order to build up good policies. And this led a few years after to the creation of the observatory, which is based in Lisbon, the MCDA, and which was created within the framework of the European Union. Then in the 90s, the huge enlargement to the east of the Council of Europe, but also of the Pompidou Group. So 7 countries, additional countries joined the group: Hungary, Poland, Slovak Republic, Czech Republic, Croatia, Estonia, and the Russian Federation. I will say something more about the Russian Federation a little bit later. And of course, at the time, the Pompidou Group grew and had 26 member states. Then there was an important feature also in the field of the fight against trafficking, the creation of the Airports Group, which brings together experts from the police and from the customs in order to share information on the trafficking of drugs in the big airports. And this group, expert group, has been created in '95 and still existing today. It has been enlarged to general aviation, because it's not only in big airports that you have this problem, but also in small airports. The launch of the European Drug Prevention Prize in 2004, and this is the Prevention Prize which was given in 2014. It is a prize which is given to NGOs for their efforts to prevent drug use. And we deliver it normally every 2 years. The last time it has been delivered was last year in 2021, when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Pompidou Group. Then the creation of MedNET, the Mediterranean Network for Cooperation on Drugs and Addiction, which was created back in 2006, and which brings together Pompidou Group members from the northern Mediterranean and Pompidou Group non-members from the southern part of the Mediterranean, Morocco, Tunisia, Morocco, after that, has joined and is now a member. Tunisia, also Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine. So it's an important framework where, because the Mediterranean is, of course, a crossroads of a lot of exchanges and trafficking also. So it's a crossroads of knowledge sharing between the two sides of the Mediterranean. And it has been France and Italy who were an initiative of the creation of this network. Then we also have set up in 29 the executive training sessions where officials from our member states can be trained on different issues related to drug policies, and this has been proven to be very successful. And of course, anyone who would be interested in joining these executive training sessions are welcome. Then in the 2010s, so 1 decade ago, there has been a period of major upheaval. It was linked to the financial crisis. And there had been 5 members who left the Pompidou Group because, as I mentioned, it's not obligatory for a country to participate in the Pompidou Group. They can join or leave. And mostly it was for financial reasons. It was a time when some countries wanted to make savings. And 11 countries joined. And the Pompidou Group was then pushed to refocus its activities on the importance of ensuring full respect of human rights in the adoption and implementation of drug policies. So that's the moment where a strong focus on human rights has been made within the Pompidou Group. It was seen as not only the identity of the Pompidou Group being a body of the Council of Europe, but also the added value that the Pompidou Group can bring in the international landscape. I want to stress that among the 11 countries which joined in the last 10 years, in the last decade, there are 3 non-European countries: Morocco in 2011, Israel in 2013, and Mexico in 2017. And this is very important because, of course, it opens up new avenues of cooperation for the Pompidou Group, and it shows also the interest that the work of the Pompidou Group is having even beyond the European continent. Then we have launched 10 years ago a program on drugs in prisons in a number of countries: Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. The aim of this program is to create conditions for people who have drug addictions to receive treatment in the prisons. And this is something which was quite difficult to convince the authorities in a number of countries, because especially those coming from the former Soviet Union, they did not have the awareness that there is a need. More or less the plan was, okay, they have problems with drugs, we just cut and that's it. They will stop. But of course, it's not as easy as that. And especially, we have worked a lot with Moldova on within this program, and we have built up a therapeutic community in one of the Moldovan prisons in Pruncul, which I visited a few months ago, and which is quite impressive. It's working quite well. And the skepticism of the Moldovan authorities, the initial skepticism, is now changed into a strong political commitment. A law will be adopted which will allow those therapeutic communities to be implemented throughout the country, not only in one prison. And this program is financed by Luxembourg, thanks to Luxembourg authorities. Then in 2018, that's the moment when I joined the Pompidou Group. I joined a few months before the ministerial session in Stavanger. At the time it was Norway, which was chairing the Pompidou Group. And as the new executive secretary, the first thing I did was to look into the history of the Pompidou Group, because I'm passionate about history. And as I said before, quoting Abraham Lincoln, you cannot do something intelligent if you don't know the history. And what I saw is that there was a need for the Pompidou Group to reflect on its objectives, its functioning, its operation, and its added value, because the last statute of the Pompidou Group dated back in 1980, so that was 40 years ago. And Europe and the way we address drug policies had changed a lot since 1980. So I proposed, as the new Executive Secretary, to launch what it was called the statutory revision process of the Pompidou Group, so looking into everything we are doing, whether we believe it's worthwhile to do it or to continue to change it, exploring new avenues, and then hoping that the Committee of Ministers will adopt the new statute of the Pompidou Group. I was aware, of course, that this was not an easy thing to do, but I was confident that it was possible, because I have worked 10 years in the Committee of Ministers, so I knew quite well how things are going and what is likely to happen or not. So the process has been launched at the ministerial session in Stavanger in November 2018, and at the same time, the work program has been adopted for the next 4 years. That means still today we are implementing this work program, and the basic objective of this work program were a better overview of drug policy approaches, new insights from research and practice on use and abuse of psychoactive substances, including comorbidities, contribution to cost effectiveness, and identifying an awareness of the positive and the negative consequences of drug-related policies by providing tools, guidance, and models of tried and tested practice, support to member states in developing, implementing, and evaluating their drug policies, strategies, and action plans, international visibility and recognition for successful national policies and interventions, flexible responses to address emerging issues in a timely manner and on an ad hoc basis, and improved policy responses by access to specialized professional networks and cooperation platforms. That were the basic objective. There still are, by the way, because we have not yet finished to implement this work program. It will end at the end of 2022. Within this new work program, we have another important feature is the launch of the International Drug Policy Academy. It is based on the 10 years of implementation of the executive training sessions, and we have created an agreement with the Syracuse University in the US and the University of Malta to create this Drug Policy Academy. It offers the opportunity to obtain a certificate in drug policy management through a full-time course leading to a diploma in drug policy. So that's a very new and unique initiative of the Pompidou Group, where high-level officials of our member states can be trained and have a diploma in drug policy. The first comprehensive course in drug policy has been launched in August 2021, and there were 3 sessions, and the last one took place in April 2022. And of course, we will continue this initiative in the next work program. Then I mentioned already the 50th anniversary of the Pompidou Group. The motto was human rights at the heart of drug policy, and it has been celebrated throughout the year 2021 in a series of events which were taking place in Europe and beyond. Of course, the most important feature of the anniversary was the expected at the time, but now it's done, adoption of the revised statute by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. And I have been, when I've discussed with my colleagues in the Secretariat what we should do to celebrate the anniversary, then we made a kind of brainstorming exercise to do something special, and well, some people were saying the hemicycle of the Council of Europe, things like that, but I felt it was not really special. I wanted something special. So I said, and why not the Pompidou Center in Paris? And they told me, but we know nobody there. I said, okay, but let's try. And I sent an email to the director of the Pompidou Center, and extraordinarily, he knew that the Pompidou Group was existing, and he said immediately, yes, you're welcome. So that's the reason why we have celebrated our anniversary in the Pompidou Center in Paris. And the statutory revision, as I already mentioned, there are a lot of important features in the new statute. Is first of all the strong focus on human rights. We were already doing it, but we did not really have the mandate to do it. And in the new statute, the Committee of Ministers empowers the Pompidou Group to, and I quote, make sure that the human rights are taken into consideration in the conception, the adoption, implementation, and evaluation of drug policies. So we now have an official mandate by the political body of the Council of Europe to do that. We were more or less doing it before, but now we are not only encouraged, but we are entrusted to do it. And that's, of course, a huge step. The second important step is we have the extension of the mandate of the Pompidou Group. It's not only about drug policies now, about illicit drugs, but we can also deal with addictions. And of course, there is a huge territory which we are going to explore in the coming years, is the online addictions, which is a big health challenge today. Addictions to social networks, addictions to gaming, gambling online. And this is something that we were not allowed to do before and that we are now allowed to do under the new statute. But of course, we can also deal with other illicit substances like alcohol or tobacco, but this is not something probably that will be a priority for us because a lot of work has already been done in this field, and we are always looking for having an added value and not doing what others are already doing. Then we had also an important event, the European Symposium on Drug Consumption Rooms on the 1st of July that we co-organized together with the city of Strasbourg and the ITAC Association, which runs the Strasbourg Consumption Room. It took place in the hemicycle of the Council of Europe. It brought together some 330 participants from 33 countries, and the Irish Minister of Health made us the honor to participate online in this hybrid event. By the way, we will organize another European consumption symposium, drug consumption rooms, in May 2023. The plan is to organize it every 2 years, bringing together all cities and NGOs, all cities which are hosting drug consumption rooms and NGOs which are implementing those rooms. Then, as I mentioned already, we have celebrated the 50th anniversary in Paris on the 28th October, and on this occasion, there was the 10th award ceremony of the Drug Prevention Prize. And the closing event of the anniversary was the symposium which took place in Lisbon on 15 December on evolution of cannabis policies, experiences, and lessons learned. I don't need to explain to you that cannabis is a high topic on the agenda of almost all governments in Europe. You of course know that there are several initiatives going on from countries which would like to legalize cannabis. Malta already has done it. And other countries are very skeptical, if not opposing those initiatives. So this is something that we are following, of course, very closely. Needless to say, the Pompidou Group doesn't have a stand on this. It is up to the member states to decide what they want to do in this field, but we are trying to follow the experiences and share whatever can be called good practices. And of course, we are doing this in close connection with the European Monitoring Center of Drugs and Drug Addiction, who has a very strong expertise in this field and in others, of course, by the way. And this symposium marked the closing event of the 50th anniversary. In 2021, there was also an important event, an important decision, the decision taken by the government of Ukraine to join the Pompidou Group. We had been working for almost 10 years with Ukraine, helping the country to build up its drug strategy, and I visited Kyiv in July 2021. I had discussions with the Minister of Interior, of Health, and of Justice, and also with the Parliament. And after that, the Parliament took the decision to join, and the government followed that decision. And at the end of 2021, we had our 42nd member state, Ukraine. But we did not, we could not manage to be 42 for a long time, because on the 24th of February, as everybody knows, Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and this has led to a very strong and immediate reaction by the Council of Europe. On the 25th of February, one day after the aggression started, the Committee of Ministers decided to launch the procedure provided by Article 8 of the Statute of the Council of Europe, which allows the other countries to exclude a member state which violates the values of the Council of Europe. This is a very extraordinary feature, because it's the first time in the history of the Council of Europe that Article 8 has been used. There has been a precedent in the 60s after the military coup in Greece by the so-called colonels regime, but Greece decided to withdraw from the Council of Europe under Article 7 before being excluded under Article 8. And of course, when the Committee of Ministers decided to suspend the Russian Federation from its rights and representation in the Council of Europe, we all were expecting to receive a letter from Mr. Lavrov saying that Russia would withdraw from the Council of Europe, but we did not. And then, on the 10th March, the Committee of Ministers decided to make a step further and to formally consult the Parliamentary Assembly on the potential further use of Article 8. And on 15 March, the Parliamentary Assembly met an extraordinary session, and it was clear that the Parliamentary Assembly had a very overwhelming opinion that Russia should be excluded. And a few hours before the vote took place, we received finally the letter of Mr. Lavrov saying that Russia would withdraw from the Council of Europe. But it was too late. The Committee of Ministers, the day after, on the 16th March, considered that based on the opinion of the Assembly, 206 votes in favor, 3 abstentions, to exclude the Russian Federation from the Council of Europe, the Committee of Ministers decided not to take into consideration the letter of Mr. Lavrov, and decided to exclude the Russian Federation of the from the Council of Europe. And this was a very important decision. Of course, it is obvious to understand that it is important when you exclude such a country like the Russian Federation. By the way, it's the only international organization where Russia has been excluded. But if the Committee of Ministers would have accepted the withdrawal of Russia, according to the rules of the Council of Europe, Russia, you cannot withdraw from one day to another for budgetary reasons, because you have to pay for the budget. So when a country decides to withdraw in the 9 first months, it remains a member until the end of the year. When it decides to withdraw in the 3 last months of the year, it remains a member until the end of the year after. That's the reason why the Committee of Ministers could not accept the withdrawal, because if the Committee of Ministers would have accepted the withdrawal, Russia would still be a member of the Council of Europe today, which was, of course, politically unacceptable. That's the reason why the Committee of Ministers decided to take the decision that it was too late to withdraw, to use Article 7, because it was already almost at the end of the process of Article 8, and it took the decision of excluding the Russian Federation with immediate effect on the 16th of March. And the result was that 1 week after, on the 23rd of March, the Committee decided also to exclude the Russian Federation for all entities of the Council of Europe, including the Pompidou Group. And so we are faced with a new situation. We were so happy to be 42 in January, and in March we were only 41 again. There has been a strong solidarity expressed by our member states to Ukraine, and there has been a statement on the 26th of June by the Pompidou Group presidency on the solidarity in Ukraine, recalling the decisions taken by the Committee of Ministers, and also the cooperation which has taken place over the last 10 years with Ukraine. And the presidency stressed 3 aspects of particular importance. First, the disruption of access to drug treatment services, which undermines the health situation of people in Ukraine with substance use disorders. We already had this problem with Crimea, because Russia, when it took over Crimea, they cut all the treatments that Ukraine was providing to people with drug addictions in prisons, especially, but not only in prisons, in hospitals, because the Russian line is very strict. No drugs, no treatment. People who have problems with drugs should just stop taking drugs, full stop. Then the solidarity between Ukraine and its neighbors, the members of the Council of Europe and of the Pompidou Group. Of course, we had to precise that because there is one neighbor, which is called the Belarus, which is not really helpful in this process, to ensure the continuity of treatment for people who use drugs. Then the drug production and trafficking situation, for which lessons learned from past armed conflicts could serve as a source of inspiration. Of course, there is a big worry about the consequences of the conflict on the trafficking routes and drug production. And of course, we committed to continue in close cooperation with the authorities from Ukraine and the relevant neighboring countries to follow closely the developments in and around Ukraine and to contribute to providing informed policy responses to a constantly moving situation. Then I wanted to mention also the Parliamentary Assembly report, which should be dear to your heart because the rapporteur is Senator Joseph O'Reilly from Ireland, and which pointed out a very important health problem, especially in the US. It's the addiction to prescribed medicines. This report has been debated in the Parliamentary Assembly on the 31st of May 2022, and it highlights the need for a reaction at European level on that societal problem that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and at the same time being lowered on the public health priority list due to the pandemic. And the recommendation makes a number of, the report makes a number of recommendations, especially highlighting also the importance of the World Health Organization guidelines. At the end of 2021, we also have received a candidature to be the next presidency of the Pompidou Group, a candidate from Italy. It was following a call from the member states because, of course, we had to identify which country would be the next president, and we had discussions to avoid having conflicting interests and try to find a consensus. And after the discussions, it came out that Italy would be the candidate. And in its letter of candidacy, Italy stressed its future priorities. First, to focus on the introduction of new initiatives pertaining to the new statute, encompassing behaviorals and other addictions beside illicit drugs. Second, to strengthen a gender-specific dimension to drug policies. We already have spoken about that. And third, to extend cooperation in the Mediterranean region, maintaining human rights-sensitive transversal approach. And Switzerland became the candidate to be the vice presidency. Of course, this candidature has been made by the previous Italian government. You know that there is a new Italian government. According to my information that I have, this candidate it would normally be maintained by the new Italian government. We are now looking forward to the Lisbon Ministerial Conference, which will be the end of the Portuguese presidency of the Pompidou Group. And this is an important event which takes place every 3 to 4 years, and which gives the priorities, the strategic priorities for the Pompidou Group for the next 3 or 4 years. The conference will consider a report drawn up by the permanent correspondents of the member states on the achievements of the last 4 years, then approve the new work program and elect the presidency and the vice presidency for the incoming period, which will last 3 years, 2023-2025. And it will take place in Lisbon on 13 and 14 December 2022. And it will also, of course, adopt a final declaration based on the results and conclusion of the group work and set up the broad policy direction to be followed in the coming years. The future perspective of the Pompidou Group. So I'm now sharing things which are still a little bit confidential because these are discussions which are still going on. But as it stands today, the main objective of the next work program would be the one you can see on your screen: promoting sustainable drug policy in conformity with human rights, safeguarding democratic societies by addressing addictions that impact human autonomy, protecting the rights of people in vulnerable situations, reducing trafficking of illegal drugs and precursors, promoting human rights compliance in drug policy responses, and exploring strategies to address addictions, including those related to the use of communication and information technologies and applications, addressing human rights, gender, and civil society participation as transversal aspects for all Pompidou Group activities, and continue the regional sustainable networks in the Mediterranean and the criminal justice and prison program and the Southeast Europe cooperation. And while discussing about the new work program, we also are taking into consideration the international context, the current international context, and also the current challenges. So as regards the international context, we have been following the analysis of the World Health Organization, which says that 70% of outbreaks of diseases occur in fragile and in conflict-related contexts. Global increases in problems of drugs and addictions reflect and contribute to the international tensions rooted in armed conflicts, climate changes, political disillusionment, reduced family and community cohesiveness, fragile living conditions, marginalization, and increased crime. All these leads to the expectation that drugs and addictions will remain one of the main public health challenges in the future. As regards the MCDDA, we follow also the line of the MCDDA, which has stressed that we are facing a very complex drug situation, more complex. I remember the words of Alexis Gosdel, who said that in his press conference in June, presenting the European report, 2022, said that he mentioned everyone, everywhere, and everything. Drugs are everywhere. Everything can be used as a drug, and everyone can be touched by the drug phenomena. And this is characterized by high availability and greater diversity in patterns of drug consumption, and globalization continues to drive innovation in drug policy, trafficking and production. International events have, in particular Ukraine of course, but also Afghanistan, have the potential to impact the drug problems we face in Europe. And then, according to UNODC, the conflict in Ukraine has an effect on existing drug trafficking routes and also exacerbates the instability that makes drug trafficking and manufacturing flourish. Previous experiences, as I already mentioned, have shown that conflicts can act as a magnet for synthetic drugs production. As regards the challenge, we will tackle we have identified two main aspects: internet and numeric behaviors. Of course, internet offers new and positive possibilities, but it can also be a risk environment for developing behavioral addictions, such as excessive and compulsive video gaming, gambling, online shopping, streaming or social network use, which are often associated with other unhealthy behaviors, including the consumption of drugs and alcohol, as well as physical inactivity. There is a growing concern about the increased use of performance and image-enhancing drugs, widespread use of social media, in particular with visual enhancement filters, as well as use of algorithms, is amplifying the phenomenon. As you may know, the Council of Europe is also a pioneer organization to work in the field of artificial intelligence. Then there is still a very strong focus on the fight against trafficking. Drug markets and organized crime are innovating all the time, which results in increased number of and availability of different substances, as well as their potency. Reducing trafficking and production will remain a key policy challenge, and increased international cooperation is needed to fight organized crime and trafficking everywhere, in particular on the waterways, in airports, and on the land. Then we will continue to build on with our partnerships, very strong and reliable partnerships, especially with UNODC, the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Addiction, the World Health Organization, and the European Commission, to which should be added also the CICAD, which is our our counterpart from the Americas, where we also have a cooperation agreement and whom we are working quite closely. So now to end up with some recent publications, so you have some reading to do. One publication about human rights and people who use drugs in the Mediterranean region. Then another one on COVID-19 and people who use drugs. Human rights at the heart of drug policies. It is a publication, it is the official 50th anniversary publication. And more recent one, 2022, implementing a gender approach on drug policy. I understand that you will have a presentation of this one. Human rights in drug policy, a self-assessment tool, that's very important. It's something that has been created this year by the Pompidou Group, where countries can self-assess how much their drug policies are in line with their human rights obligations. And children whose parents use drugs. So some reading for you, and but you should not forget about the words of a famous Irish singer. His grandfather was called Jack O'Loughlin. I'm not sure it's the good pronunciation. And his name is John Lennon. And he said the following: life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis, for that fascinating overview of the work of the Pompidou Group over the last 50 years and work into the future. And I suppose one of the things you said there was that drug and addictions will remain one of the public health challenges in the future. So I think it's safe to say there's plenty of work for everybody in this room in the future. And meetings like this and information that we'll be getting today is going to inform that work. And I think that we're going to move in now neatly into some talking about research. And I think Dennis has said you can only build good policies if you have solid data.